Breaking news overnight, a reporter for the Al Jazeera network was shot and killed while covering an Israeli raid in the West Bank.
We are absolutely heartbroken to learn of the killing of Palestinian-American journalist Shireen Abu Akleh and strongly condemn her killing, as we do the killing of journalists around the world.
To 500 million people around the world, Shireen Abu Akleh was the trusted face that they would rely on for news from the Middle East. For more than 20 years as a Palestinian-American journalist, Shireen was living the very story she was covering, the Israeli occupation of Palestine.
She was, as you say, wearing a helmet and body armor that was clearly marked as press when she was shot.
Shireen was an American citizen with deep ties to the United States. Born in Jerusalem, she was raised Christian and spent much of her childhood in New Jersey. Shireen was drawn back to the region to cover the suffering and tragedy of the Palestinian people. I've been covering the Middle East for 20 years, most recently for the Wall Street Journal. I've been kidnapped in Gaza, blown up in Beirut.
I'm standing in the wreckage of my apartment.
And shot at by Houthi fighters in Yemen. I've lost journalist friends to Israeli tank fire, so Shireen's death hit me hard. Her death sent shockwaves through the region. Thousands of people lined up to mourn her. When the funeral procession set out for the cemetery, the police in Jerusalem attacked her casket, sparking even more outrage. And because Shireen was a U.S. citizen, her death and the Israeli response created an immediate crisis for the Biden administration. One U.S. official said privately that Israel had killed Shireen twice by attacking her casket.
The thing that was, very striking right at the start of this was the way in which the public statements very clearly attempted to shift responsibility for her death onto Palestinians. The very first statement that was put out by the IDF, which creates a sort of portrayal that there was overwhelming gunfire from Palestinian militants.
Immediately following Shireen's death, Israel's then Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett, blamed Palestinians for her killing and set up a narrative that Israeli soldiers would never intentionally target a journalist clearly wearing body armor labeled with press.
Investigating attacks on independent media and prosecuting those responsible are of paramount importance.
When the White House thought it was likely that Shireen had been killed by a Palestinian militant, the Biden administration called for the shooter to be prosecuted. And this was a president who said he would never tolerate attacks on American citizens around the world. However, there was a problem with the Israeli explanation. There were no Palestinian militants anywhere near Shireen or her team. Journalists at the scene said the fatal shots came from Israeli forces 200 meters up the road from Shireen. Within days, the Israeli narrative collapsed under the overwhelming evidence of eyewitnesses corroborated by video.
All the investigative work that went on by both the media and other agencies into this clearly showed that initial account from the IDF was not accurate.
After a few months of evading responsibility, Israel finally admitted one of their own soldiers killed Shireen. American officials said they couldn't determine if Shireen's killing was a crime without talking to the shooter, but Israel refused to cooperate. No one has been held to account. Justice has not been served. I want to know, who killed Shireen? If we don't answer this question, more journalists, more Americans, and more innocent people will be targeted and killed with impunity. So we decided we were going to find the shooter ourselves.
All right, 3, 2, 1. All right, I'm gonna hit record.
When Shireen was killed, it was such a shock to all of us. And then to watch how Israel used misinformation and disinformation to obscure the facts for months was really disturbing to me.
Shireen was not just any journalist. She is the first American Palestinian journalist, American journalist who has been killed by Israeli forces in the West Bank.
I think the bigger story for us is why the U.S. government abdicated any role in this investigation and why Israel has refused to tell the U.S. government the name of the shooter and who the shooter was and any information about the shooter.
The Biden administration produced a classified report on Shireen's death, but they refused to release it.
We know the senior Biden people, like, they're not talking about Shireen's death. They're not talking about Palestinian deaths. They're not really talking at all. Are there going to be people here in D.C. over the next couple of days that are lower level that might be willing to talk?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of people here that are longtime sources that I want to hit up on this. Because it's so closed off, they're very reluctant to talk. But it's the end of the administration. You know, I'm hoping that maybe they'll ease up a little bit and be more willing to share information.
Do we think that any of them have the actual name, though?
Yeah, I don't think anybody has his name. You know, when she was first shot, the U.S. wanted to interview the guy, and Israel said no.
Do we think it's so closely held because it's embarrassing to Israel?
I think it's for political reasons. I'm not sure. There's, you know, when we talked to Senator Van Hollen, he has read the report and he's called for it to be declassified. I drive myself crazy with this, is that people think they understand. People think they know what happened with Shireen's shooting, but they don't, right? Like, the narrative has been so obscured by the Israeli obfuscation that even like the top US officials that worked on this, I don't think really understand what happened that day.
I want to hear from somebody who was closer to it on the Israeli side.
Yeah, so one of the best people that can do that is this guy, Eyal Hulata, who was the national security advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, who was the prime minister when Shireen Abu Akleh was killed. So he was in the room when they were responding to this crisis. You know, one of the most famous things that happened was that the prime minister put out this video on Twitter, you know, that's suggested that Palestinians had killed her. It was a video of these Palestinian militants, remember? You know, shooting down an alleyway, and they were like, there's a high likelihood that she was killed by Palestinian militants. Hello. Hello. Hello.